because we know that some of the programs are legit, like the MK Ultra programs. There's proof of the MK Ultra programs actually being a thing. Stargate programs, remote viewing with the CIA. A lot of those documents have been declassified. So we know that they were interested in doing these kinds of things, and there's proof for that. But my original thought, whenever I was trying to decipher all this in my mind, was that it had something to do with the Montauk Project, right? And like how they would strap people down into a chair. They would apparently open up a portal in front of them, and then which, now that I'm thinking about it, it seems more like a simulation, like what you're talking about. It's a holographic simulation that they're opening up in front of them. But my original thought was that, well, if they can mind fracture people with the MK Ultra, disassociate them to such a degree, and then if they actually could open up a real portal, then they would be able to take a part of that fractalized consciousness and throw it through the portal, and then have that part of the consciousness go out and live a 20 and back program, 40 and back, 60 and back, and then come back. And it would be like 5 minutes in this reality, but it was like 40, 60 years out there in a completely different alternate reality or parallel reality.
I mean, everyone's had dreams. Everyone understands the time warp between dreams and reality, right? Like, you can have a dream that seems like it goes on for days or weeks, right? There's even been people who have done things like smoke DMT and have an experience like that where they're gone, or salvia or something like that. Like a very famous comedian talks about one where he was gone and had like a whole other life that he just lived for 3 to 6 months. Meanwhile, he was just sitting in the same chair for 10 minutes, right? And he can't really distinguish. He knows that he wasn't really living this other life, but he can't really distinguish the memories from reality. That's no different, right? Like DMT and these different suggestion type drugs like LSD, like salvia, like magic mushrooms, all of those things put you in a hypnotic, trance-like, suggestible state. You give someone the right concoction, put something on a screen in front of them, especially if you can holographically project images into the brain, which we can do, then you can convince people that they are actually living through these experiences. And you can actually design it like a movie that they interact with, almost like a video game that they go out and play. I sometimes use movies to show people how this works, like Ender's Game, right? If you remember an Ender's Game, I mean, that was set in a world where they actually were out in space and having fights with aliens, but the majority of what he went through was actually a simulation he thought was real. And then the movie actually wraps up by them putting him through a simulation he thinks is just a simulation, but ends up being real, right? So that's kind of showing you both ends of that concept. But when I say proof is in the result, every whistleblower has said that disclosure is coming. Even they have kind of told you that they were going to tell you the truth eventually, right? The truth is out there. And when I wrote my blog, I called it The Path of Discoveries, which is them slowly releasing technology to the public that they just discovered, right? New scientific evidence that they just discovered, new facts about us as humans in the past that they just discovered. And we have that. We have a ton of that. And what we don't have is any technology that matches the secret space program. What we do have is a bunch of technology that matches the secret space program as I present it. And like, it was called that, it was called the secret space program, but then it didn't have anything to do with outer space. They actually have a different word for the concept of what outer space is because they actually understand what it is. Space, or outer space, is something the public has been programmed to believe in. It's not even real in the way that they teach it to us. So of course, it's just a play on language, which is a typical magician trick of illusion, right? Just to like play with the language. Secret space program. You hear that. You even have that in your memory because you've heard it repeated in your ears a bunch of times. And then you're out in the public, and of course that becomes outer space. And again, to relate it to a movie, if you've ever seen the movie Get Out, they show you what the secret space program is.
It's in your mind.
And they show it to you in context of how they can use it to program you and basically push you back while something else takes control and drives you like a car, right? So once again, we have all of these real things in the world that, if you put them together, lead to one example of a secret space program. What we do not have is anything that even resembles the crazy amount of technology involved in the secret space program as it's provided.
I read it. Very, very interesting article how they're using this holographic simulation tech. And I think that that's a high possibility that that's what a lot of these secret space program and these super soldiers and that are claiming that they, went in this 20 and back program and they went to Mars, to the moon to fight aliens. I believe it's a high possibility that it was an actual holographic simulation.
Yeah, no, it easily could be a holographic simulation. We're not far off from that. A lot of people think the metaverse and Neuralink and all that is a long ways away. It's not. The cell phone is already dead. But I want to add one more thing, Ryder. If you want to know where a lot of those Mars stories came from the last few years and why some of them are so crazy, is that if you go back to Project Camelot, are you familiar with Project Camelot?
Yes.
If you go back to Project Camelot and Project Avalon and all that sort of stuff, and the days of Carrie Cassidy, there was a guy on there named Henry Deacon, and his real name was Arthur Newman. And he disappeared shortly after he started talking. He was a physicist, and he talked about some incredible stuff. But he started talking about stuff he shouldn't have been talking about. And one of the things is that he was talking about was Mars. And he also talked a lot about the jab and other things that were coming. If people pay close attention to what he said a lot of very interesting things years before they happened. So pay attention to what he said. But when you listen to what he had to say, he talked a lot about what was up on Mars. Now, Mars isn't as fancy as what you see in the movies. There isn't Channing Tatum running around Jupiter ascending and all that sort of stuff. You might say there's some primitive stuff they've done up there. There's some areas like the Marianas Trench, some very deep areas, low types of gravity, and not much of an atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. But he talked about stuff he shouldn't have been talking about. So what he received a warning, essentially, from what I was told. And to offset what he said, which was premature because he talked about Mars way earlier than he should have talked about it. You saw a lot of guys then coming out years later talking about like jump rooms where they're up there with Obama and they're having lunch with him and all kinds of different stories that were coming out of Mars. One disinformation campaign after the other would roll out years later. I'm not naming any names, but you get the picture.
Now, what does the Theta Tauri race and any of the other reptilian races said about the secret space program? What did they say about that?
Many humans have either deluded themselves, have mental illness, mental health issues, missed childhoods, they never grew up properly, daddy issues, lack of attention that they're receiving in life, lack of friendships in life, lack of brotherhood, they have loneliness, or they've just created falsehood stories in order to give themselves forms of self-importance. Most are ego-driven, egomaniacs. They're not powerful, they're powerless rats. They're just egomaniacs. So when they speak about this SSB, they know it's not real. They're just pretending that they know something about it. Look at James Rink, documentary investigation by a fellow Canadian here. Wonderful guy, Somalian black guy living in Canada, in Toronto, city of Toronto, province of Ontario. His name is Oki, O-K-I. Has a YouTube channel with like 1 million subscribers or something. Oki's Weird Stories. He did a documentary infiltrating the SSB cult in the United States, in Las Vegas, called How I Infiltrated a Bizarre Conspiracy Theory. And then there's a part 2 called How I Became a Space Jesus. That's a great example for people to see how SSB is fraudulent. So a lot of these people are ego-driven, so that they speak this SSB language, this SSB soldier history. They're making it up. It's bullshit stories and presentations and YouTube videos. Now, most importantly, to the point, there is no human SSB named program. SSB doesn't exist. It was made up by a human for humans. There are military joint operations run by extraterrestrial physical beings with advanced ships that we don't even have. We have gifted technology to have our own ships, yes, but there is no such thing as SSP, and the clown green blue chicken guy that invented that knows that, hence why he's been busted. So the rest of the mafia also needs to be busted. They have no power, they have no integrity, they have no mental warfare. They're worthless. They're cowards.
There is a secret space program, but it's nothing like, it's really rudimentary, and it's in its like kind of its early phases, right? And the secret space program assets and all that have just exaggerated the story and created this entire narrative of nonsense and, quite frankly, bullshit. I mean, excuse my language here, but it's complete bullshit. And I've been trying to really blow the whistle on that on my channel for around 8-9 months now, really digging down deep into this stuff and figure out the reason of why they would be trying to cover this up, because it's been a really big detriment to real secret space program researchers, right?
Yeah.
Like Dr. Joseph Farrell, like Walter Bosley, like they're kind of like afraid to even talk about it anymore, because we've had this whole exaggerated secret space program, time travel, regenerative technology, highly advanced technology, fighting aliens in space, age regression, laser beams, highly advanced interdimensional craft, and like all this nonsense about it, that it's really muddied the waters of really what's happening. And
good friends online, Alara, who was in my TR3B documentary I did over a year ago now, she has a channel on YouTube called Space Force News, and her whole shtick, like her whole channel, is dedicated to just talking about what's going on in space, military-wise, anomalies-wise. It's really a great channel, and she puts a lot of factual research into what she does. She looks at like anything we can get our hands on in terms of news and releases, and that's really good work. She likes to equate, the whole Corey Good tribe to being like essentially just a massive LARP, like people that think that they're, playing some kind of Lord of the Rings fantasy, but in space. And I tend to agree with her. It really doesn't bring anything to ufology. It takes away.
Well, if something is known to be, fake and false, but somebody else believes it with their whole heart, then what are you supposed to do in that situation, right? Do you say, oh well, you're fake, you're making this stuff up? But what if they actually believe it? Because there are some people that I've ran into that I've claimed to be a part of these programs that legitimately believe that they went to space for 20 years, and then when they were age regress and fought aliens for 20 years in space, and then they were age regressed back to the very point that they were taken, right? And they're taking this as like and they're putting it out there as an actual legitimate physical experience, right? When it's impossible. That doesn't line up with reality. That's not a physical possibility in this 3D physical reality, right? It's not. When you put common sense and critical thinking to it, it doesn't make any sense. So like it's a really touchy, weird subject on that front.
I guess like here's my take on it is like, first of all, it literally doesn't matter at all. I've never even known any of that stuff that you're talking about. My life is no different, right? So it doesn't matter at all. If they want to believe that's happening to them, I have no problem with that. If other people are in a place where that's what they want to do, is join in them with that delusion and read that fan fiction and have that whole experience, also doesn't matter to me. If that person then comes to me and says, I'm having a hard time regulating my life, or I'm miserable, or I'm sad, or I'm whatever, right? And then they're asking me to help them with that, and they're saying like, I believe this has happened to me, even then I'll still say, you believe that's happened to you? And then I'll maybe point out like, has it been helpful for you to believe that? Has it increased your positivity in life? Do you feel empowered? Are you able to do the things that make you happy as a person? And if the answer is no, is it possible that you let go of some of those beliefs and maybe focus on other things, right? Because again, it's not, why would it affect my life if they think that's happened to them? I don't care. I don't care if you think you're a dog or you're a fucking unicorn and you prance around with like tails and streamers and whatever. Like, doesn't affect me at all. The only time it will ever matter to me is if you're coming to me and asking me for my help in some way, right? Or again, if you're going to some kind of psychological or psychologist or therapist or something, they're also then going to care. But before that moment, who cares? And even when you're saying, oh, but there's people they're kind of gathering up into their lives and making them believe this stuff, that's not their fault. That's those people's fault. Those people have a problem or don't, right? Those people chose to go find someone who is not believable and go off of no evidence and then, throw their money or their time or their life into this thing. That happens in every category we can think of, right? It happens in health things. It happens with people who say they're spiritual healers. It happens with people who are just selling produce at a store. Like, you can get fallen in with some pretty shisty shit no matter what category you're looking at life. And that's all you, right? That's the person, the individual's responsibility. So even then, I'm not too concerned with their lies or their things that they're, I understand it's different if this is like your life's work and you're dedicated to bringing out what you see as the truth. It is very frustrating to see people get away with this, especially when they're so well funded and they're the ones getting like all the attention, right? Because it's directed at them on purpose, because it's misdirecting everybody from what might actually be going on. But I can't control that, so I don't care.
Well, it's not so much that it affects me personally, but I tend to think of the community as a whole, right? It affects, I don't care either, right? Me personally,
Right.
don't care.
Yeah, you're not affected by it.
Does not affect me in the least bit, but it does affect the community, and I care about the community, right? And when people are putting out bogus bullshit, fairy tale nonsense, space traveling stories and passing them off as real stories, and they're making money off of that and writing books about that and making it be a physical, real thing, that's a problem. It's not a problem for me personally, because again, I'm just like you, like I don't personally care, but I do care about the integrity and the honor of the community, right? And it's muddying the waters of real researchers and real people that have been trying to, blow the whistle on real things that are going on Earth. That's the problem that I have with it, right?
It's
Has
very frustrating.
nothing to do with me personally. I could
Yeah.
care less, right? It's more about the integrity and the honor of the community and the people that are actually putting out real good information, and they've turned it into something that it's not. This is what they claim. That these SSP people were taken as a child by the military or the CIA to a military base. Locations vary, right? And suffered torture and rape and starvation, being locked in cages, very little daylight, stuff like that, torturous conditions. And after that, immediately after that, mind you, they were taken through a jump room to Mars or the moon from California or New York to fight aliens in space with highly advanced technology, body suits, cyborgs, clones, laser guns, technology like med beds and regenerative tanks and replicator technology. And after all that, right, after serving for 20, 40, 60 years, however long they say that it is, their age regressed magically right back to the very time that very moment that they were taken as a young child. What do you think of that?
Okay. Multiple things. Ultimately, I'll get to the only one thing that if the people who tell stories like that aren't consciously making up and lying, that it could be. But first, essentially, I think all of that is a bunch of nonsense. That people who want attention and want to be stars in the UFO world, go on whatever outlet will have them on and make these claims because they know that the audience is going to be wowed and entertained, and they're not going to question it, and certainly not the hosts that will have them. But yeah, I think it's nonsense. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's fantasy, and I think it has been very damaging to ufology and to the community in general.
So I think that David Wilcock is really freaking out, trying to distance himself from Corey right now. And I predict that we will never, ever see those two together again. David Wilcock's got to cut and run from this guy because he's creating too many problems for him. Not the least of which is that David Wilcock has been backing up his fake stories for 5 years now.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that video of David Wilcock saying that how he verified Corey's story, psychic communication or whatever? That's how he verified Corey's story was real.
He said, if what you're doing with Corey is real, then I want you to have him answer this question. I want you to tell him to tell me the answer to this question. He needs to know what the question was and what the answer is. And I didn't say it out loud. I never talked to anybody about it. I only did it in my head. And by God, the next time Corey had a blue avian contact, he calls me up and he says, well, David, I don't know why, but they told me to tell you blah, 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 and blah, 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 and the answer is blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no effing way. That is the closest I could come to due diligence on this where I got proof.
Yeah, the Egyptian god Ra. And also, in a case of terrible timing, David Wilcock's new book, which he claims is from communications with the Archangel Michael, who, by the way, has told him to take baths in his own urine to get superpowers. But besides that, in the book, he's essentially claiming that the Archangel Michael told him that Corey's stories are true, which is a big problem because if you know anything about biblical prophecies or prophets, you know, there's something called the test of a prophet, which essentially says if you're wrong one time, you're not a prophet. And if an entity, for example, David Wilcock is claiming he's in communication with the Archangel Michael, divine sources are not wrong. So in other words, if God is speaking to a prophet, or the Archangel Michael is speaking to a prophet and giving prophecies or information, and any of that information, even one thing, turns out to be incorrect, misleading, or wrong, then that's proof by itself that you're not in communication with the divine source. The Bible is very clear on this. It's called the test of a prophet. If you're wrong one time, that means that you're not speaking to God. You're not speaking to a divine source like an angel. You're most likely speaking to demons or some trickster, deceptive spirit masquerading as a divine source. So this becomes a huge problem for David, who's claiming that other people are Luciferian Satanists. And meanwhile, I can prove through Bible scripture and verse that David Wilcock is essentially selling people information that most likely, according to the Bible, is coming from demons, not angels. That's going to be a real problem for his sales. And also, what terrible timing. David Wilcock really needs money. He comes out with this book that he claims is from the Archangel Michael, who also, by the way, he's talking to the Blessed Mother. She's appearing to him too. But
out of all the people in the world, all the people on earth, freaking the Archangel Michael communicates through David Wilcock.
Yeah, but the terrible timing is that David Wilcock gave all of his money to this scammy aerospace company, Stavati Aerospace. And I'm told that's one of the reasons his wife left him. But anyway, he really needs money right now. So he comes out with this book that he's saying is from the Archangel Michael. And there's verifiable proof that it's all inaccurate information because he's saying Corey Goode is telling the truth in this book. And this happens, he puts out the book like the day or 2 days before these depositions all come out, proving that it's all fake and that David Wilcock has been pushing fake information from Corey Goode for 6 or 7 years now.
Really quick, would this technology be able to distort people's views and beliefs so much that it could make them experience something that didn't really even happen? Like, for instance, could this technology manipulate your mind so much to be able to make you believe that you were abducted by an alien, make you believe that you seen a UFO, make you believe that you were a part of a secret space program fighting aliens in space for 20 years and then being age regressed back to the very point that you were taken.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, people come to me all the time because they think that I'm studying space and geoengineering, and so these things are interesting to me. Well, they're not really interesting. I mean, they're interesting, but I would need to know a lot more in order to say it's real. Because if your brain is being manipulated, and we've already talked about a couple of technologies that are capable of manipulating the brain at a distance. It doesn't matter the distance. We're talking satellite transmission. We're talking thousands of miles. It doesn't matter. Distance doesn't exist in this. If you keep the atmosphere ionized, you can have transmissions over many thousands of miles that are instantaneous. I mean, we do it all the time, right? You send an email to someone in New Zealand and boom, they're sending something back to you the next minute. So what's so amazing about the fact that the computer brain is being accessed and full-blown 3D, even 4D realities are just better than wraparound movies. I mean, they're so real. You don't even need the drug anymore. Like, it used to. Remember when the CIA in the early MK Ultra days was experimenting on everyone with LSD? I see that they can manipulate people into having experiences that are absolutely real. And I want to make a point there that if you have had an experience that is absolutely real and taught you something, I don't want to rob you of that. You've had that experience. But if you're going to try to convince me that that experience existed in this world for everybody around you at the same time, I can't go there because I know how the brain can be manipulated. Mine as well. I mean, this is something that I don't know. I don't quite understand why people get so attached to that. The alien idea, the super soldier idea, all of the different programs that the CIA and who knows who, NSA, whoever, are running in order to experiment with what realities you can create, synthetic realities that are just this, it's like we're doing synthetic biology now. It's working like biology, but it's been gain of function. It's been changed from the natural into something synthetic. And yet there it is. I mean, it works very well, but let's try to maintain what is of nature, what is in this time space where we are, without getting so attached to our own personal experiences that we have had.
They thought to themselves, how do we keep this from happening again? Right? How do we keep any of the countless MK Ultra survivors from coming forward with real information, with real factual evidence and testimony about what we're doing to them, right? That they're being used as drug mules, intelligence operation, coercion, prostitution, assassins, spying, and a whole host of different things. Right? And I think they were like, I know the perfect cover for that. Right? And they went back to their lab. They thought up of this genius plan. Right? Let's make them believe they were in space fighting aliens. Right?
Oh, yeah.
and get everyone talking about that so that the real stuff that's happening on Earth can be covered up. And we won't have another Cathy O'Brien on our hands testifying in front of Congress about the very real operations that we've been doing on the planet, right? Because if you get people talking about something that's fake, but similar enough to the truth, they will always opt in for the most extravagant story, and the real story can be brushed under the rug.
Exactly right. And if it goes etherical, then people think it's beyond their realm to affect. In fact, this is within our realm to affect, and they definitely try to make it look like it's not. And I also think it's funny that now that on the internet they cover it up. You look up, you look me up on Wikipedia, and it says I'm a conspiracy theorist, and it's like they invoke national security on conspiracy theories. It's like, what? So they keep coming up with these ways to try to divert and dilute attention from truth. But the truth is out there, and it's coming out, and they can't silence it. So many government secrets and personal reputations were staked on their belief that I couldn't be deprogrammed to remember those things I'd been tortured to forget. They were wrong. You should have seen their faces when they tried to trigger me, and it wouldn't work, and I would just laugh at them. It shifted their paradigm, and they need to have their paradigm shifted once and for all.